It's a Tuesday night. You're not doing anything wrong, just scrolling. Someone's new house in Miami. A vacation in Italy you've been meaning to take for 3 years. A LinkedIn post announcing a promotion, a funding round, a Forbes 30 under 30 feature. And with every swipe, something tightens in your chest. Not because your life is bad, but because someone else's life looks better. And somehow, that feels like a personal injustice. You find the explanation immediately. Nepotism, privilege, they sold out, they got lucky. This isn't envy, you tell yourself. This is just me seeing things clearly. I work just as hard. I'm a good person. They're probably not. But at 2 a.m., when you put the phone down, you remember that post. And for the first time, you feel it. Morality isn't a shield. It's a mirror. And in that mirror, envy looks exactly like justice. Friedrich Nietzsche spent his entire life staring into that mirror, and he saw what most of us refuse to see. Behind every moral judgment we make hides a desire we're too afraid to name. He was born on October 15, 1844, in a small village in Prussia. His father, a Lutheran pastor, died when the boy was 4 years old. What remained were his mother, his sister, and the silence of a church house. He taught himself ancient Greek better than anyone in the province, because there was nothing left in that house but books. By 24, he was lecturing at the University of Basel on texts other scholars were afraid to touch. And it was there, buried in ancient language, that he found what he'd been searching for since childhood. Where did the idea of good and evil actually come from? He started digging and discovered that morality was never handed down from above. It was invented. And it wasn't invented by the strong. Once, at the very beginning, the people who had strength, health, and confidence looked at themselves and said, "We're good." Not because they compared themselves to anyone, simply because they were. Their idea of goodness grew from abundance, from joy, from fullness of life. They didn't hate the weak, they simply didn't notice them. But the weak noticed the strong, and what they saw didn't produce admiration. It produced rage. They couldn't answer with strength, so they answered with morality. They renamed their powerlessness humility, their cowardice caution, their envy justice. They built a world where suffering is a virtue and success is suspicious, where the rich man is guilty simply for being rich and the struggling man is righteous simply for struggling. Think about how deeply this runs in American culture today. The instinct to tear down anyone who rises too fast, the assumption that wealth must mean corruption. The social media pile-ons where the crowd decides someone's career is over, not through argument, but through moral pressure. Nietzsche found proof of this in the oldest words in Western languages. The etymology of good traces back to noble, aristocratic, someone who simply is what they are. But then the reversal happened. The weak said, "No, good is what we do because we suffer, and evil is whoever doesn't." In 1887, Nietzsche published On the Genealogy of Morality and showed this mirror to the world. He proved that the words good and evil are not eternal truths. They are historical weapons. He called this the slave revolt in morality. But revolt is too honorable a word. This wasn't a rebellion. It was the ingenuity of a coward who figured out how to win without ever entering the fight. And here, Nietzsche picks a fight not just with religion, but with the entire moral architecture of Western civilization. He quoted the theologian Thomas Aquinas, who wrote that the blessed in heaven will look down upon the suffering of sinners to make their own happiness feel sweeter. There it is, morality not as love for your neighbor, but as secret pleasure in his fall. Envy wearing the mask of virtue. But if slave morality is just envy dressed up, what does real strength actually look like? Nietzsche found his answer at 21 when he picked up a book by Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher who argued that life is suffering and desire is a curse. Schopenhauer's solution? Kill your desires. Retreat into art, compassion, detachment. It was a philosophy of renunciation, beautiful, logical, and, in Nietzsche's view, deeply cowardly. Because Nietzsche asked a different question. What if desire isn't a disease? What if it's the only proof that you're alive? What if giving up on wanting things isn't wisdom, but just another version of the same powerlessness in a more expensive package? He called the opposite of Schopenhauer's vision the will to power. And this is where almost everyone gets him wrong. The phrase immediately conjures a dictator, a tyrant, someone trying to dominate others. That's not what he meant. The will to power is not the desire to control other people. It's an internal drive toward growth, the impulse to overcome yesterday's version of yourself. It's what makes an entrepreneur keep building after the first company fails, what makes a writer keep writing when nobody's reading. Even a plant bending toward light. That's the will to power. The person who says, "I'm satisfied," has already started dying. The person who says, "I want more," is still alive. The difference between slave morality and will to power is this. Slave morality measures itself against others. I am good because he is bad. Will to power measures itself against itself. I am more than I was yesterday. One is born from envy, the other from abundance. But where does this drive lead? Not to a throne, to the edge of a cliff. Nietzsche called the person who fully lives out the will to power the Übermensch, the overman. And again, not a superhero, not a tech billionaire on a rocket ship, not a strongman politician. The overman is someone who overcomes himself. A bridge, not a destination. He doesn't say, "I am better than others." He says, "I am more than I was yesterday." And that bridge is built through solitude, through refusing comfort, through the ability to look at the truth without flinching. Nietzsche wrote that man is a rope stretched over an abyss, between the animal and the overman. And that's terrifying, because it means everything we consider sacred, our morality, our compassion, our very humanness, is just a rung on a ladder. Not to be destroyed, to be outgrown. By this point, Nietzsche had already left his teaching post. He walked away from Basel at 34. His nerves had broken down. For nearly 10 years he moved between Switzerland, Italy, and France, changing apartments every few months because migraines made noise unbearable. He wrote by candlelight because lamplight hurt his eyes. He mailed letters that no one answered. His books sat unsold. He was a sick, frail man writing about strength. And there's no irony in that. There's honesty. Because he didn't know about envy from watching other people. He knew about it from the nights when he woke up in pain and felt the world moving forward as if he didn't exist. But he passed the test he wrote about. His idol was the composer Richard Wagner. Nietzsche loved his music, spent long stretches at his home, believed Wagner was the savior of Western culture. Wagner was the father he lost at 4. Then Wagner wrote Parsifal, a Christian opera drenched in religious submission and the worship of suffering. Nietzsche saw it as a betrayal, not of their friendship, of life itself. Wagner chose the opium. Nietzsche chose the cold. They never met again. Nietzsche dedicated his next book to Voltaire, the French writer who spent his life at war with religious hypocrisy. It was his way of saying, "I choose truth, even if truth leaves me alone." And from that point on, he lived exactly that way, alone, in cheap rooms, with migraines and manuscripts no one read. Not because he had no other option, because he chose it. It was on one of those solitary walks, on a mountain trail above a Swiss lake, with a migraine, stomach pain, near blindness, that the thought hit him. He later wrote to a friend, "The intensity of what I felt made me tremble and laugh at the same time. I couldn't leave my room. My eyes were burning. This was the thought of eternal recurrence. Nietzsche framed it as a thought experiment, a tool for testing how honestly a person lives. Imagine, a demon appears to you in your loneliest moment and says, "This life, exactly as you're living it, will repeat forever. Every detail, every heartbreak, every embarrassment, every sleepless night, unchanged." What's your reaction? If that thought fills you with horror, you're not living your own life, you're enduring it. You're waiting for it to be over instead of wanting it to last forever. Nietzsche called this the ultimate test of self-honesty. Not faith in heaven, not hope for a reward after death. The ability to look at your life right now with its wounds and its failures and its 3 a.m. moments and say, "Yes, I want exactly this." Because if every moment repeats, then every moment is eternal. There is no past to forget, no future to escape to. There is only now, and it is infinitely heavy. This isn't a philosophy for winners. It's a philosophy for someone who is losing but refuses to betray the game. But here, his system hits a wall. Nietzsche preached total acceptance of life, the pain, the losses, the humiliation, and the willingness to say yes to all of it. He called it amor fati, love of fate. But in his private notebooks, the ones he never intended to publish, he admitted something else. He didn't want this life to repeat. He could only endure it through creation, through writing, through thinking, through the image of the overman who could do what Nietzsche himself could not. He preached acceptance and privately admitted he was incapable of it. His philosophy isn't a manual for the strong. It's a message in a bottle from a man who was drowning. Have you ever told someone, "Hold on," while you were already letting go yourself? On January 3, 1889, in Turin, his landlord found him on the street. Nietzsche was embracing strangers, claiming to be the god Dionysus, signing letters as the Crucified, identifying himself with Christ. 2 names he'd spent his life placing in opposition had collapsed into a single broken man. He spent 11 years in silence, no writing, no recognition, no awareness of the world, before dying on August 25, 1900. But while Nietzsche was silent, his sister Elizabeth was not. She seized control of his archive, his manuscripts, his unpublished notes. She cut certain passages and amplified others. She removed the places where Nietzsche explicitly called anti-Semitism a disease and an act of cowardice, and there were many such places. She constructed an image of Nietzsche as a philosopher of blood and soil, a prophet of German supremacy. When Hitler rose to power, he personally visited the Nietzsche archive and was photographed beside his bust. The philosopher who wrote that nationalists made him physically sick became the icon of nationalism. The philosopher who taught resistance to the herd became the banner of herd thinking. This isn't just a historical injustice, it's a perfect illustration of Nietzsche's own idea. People take someone else's thought and immediately turn it into a new crutch, a new mirror, where envy once again reflects as justice. So here's the question. If his philosophy was built for the strong, why was it written by a man who broke? The answer is simple and brutal. Because Nietzsche wasn't celebrating strength, he was describing its absence. His overman isn't a tyrant. It's someone who doesn't turn their own pain into moral condemnation of the world. Nietzsche was weak, sick, invisible. And that's exactly why he could see it. Envy doesn't smell like acid. It smells like incense. That's why he could look behind the mirror and see that justice isn't there. What's there is fear. A person who's terrified to admit that they simply want to be someone else. You're still looking at that mirror. The question isn't who's right. The question is whether you're ready to see the light in it. Not because you deserve it, but because you're no longer afraid of the dark. Man is something that must be overcome.